I view Uncle Roger as a celebration of Asianness and Asian culture and Asian things in general. Uncle Roger never puts his own race down.
You don't want food from Laos, Cambodia. Laos food like shit version of Thai food.
Uncle Roger never puts his own race down.
And he's a nephew from Taiwan? Not a real country.
Uncle Roger never puts his own race down.
Uncle Roger don't like Korean food anymore. Korean food like shit version of Japanese food.
Uncle Roger never puts his own race down.
Yeah, because Asia's a shithole. We gotta leave.
Uncle Roger never puts his own race down.
Hello nieces and nephews. In honor of Uncle Roger's nearly 10 million subscriber milestone, I decided to honor him by cooking not just an egg fried rice, but also Nigel himself. Now, before I get into this video, I think it's important that I preface what the video will actually focus on. Cause if this video pops off, it's probably not going to be for reasons I intended, but instead because I'm going to face a substantial amount of backlash from reactionary adults and 12-year-olds bastardizing my criticism and taking my video out of context. So, in hopes of clearing this up from the get-go,
now let me be clear.
This video primarily takes criticism with Uncle Roger and the aspects of the character that reflects dynamics of minstrelsy, stereotyping, and general racist Asian tropes. As such, it's important to be aware of the fact that Uncle Roger is not an actual person, but a fictional caricature. So y'all really should not feel obligated to defend him, unless you also enjoy spending your time defending characters like Mr. Yunioshi, Mr. Popo, or any other derivative of minstrelsy and racist stereotypes brought to life through the depiction of a fictional character. And if y'all are cool with blackface, yellowface, or other racialized performances with the intention of putting down those of the marginalized community, then just click off this video. This video ain't for you. As to all those who stayed, because it's pointless to criticize a character that is not real, this video will instead direct my qualms towards the performer of these tropes who profits directly from spreading racism, that being Nigel Ng. So Nigel, if you're watching this video, there's no need to put the costume on and shit all over my fried rice, although you're free to do that if you wish. I just hope you actually consider the things being said in this video and take some of the criticism to heart, even if you can't admit to your audience that I'm right, because it'll tank your online clout and profit. Alright, let's get into it. Before I deconstruct the issues I take with Uncle Roger, it's important to understand the person who crafted the caricature. Because while it may not be apparent to many of Uncle Roger's fans, behind every character on screen lies a performer. Whether that be examples of Calvin Candy, Uncle Ruckus, Fu Manchu, or even written personas, there's always a creator and performer behind every fictional character. And it's weird I have to say this stuff, but some people low-key believe that Uncle Roger is an actual person.
This might sound a little silly, but I thought his Asian accent was real. But then my friend sent me this video where he was speaking with much less accent. And I was like, nah, no way. Which makes me a little sad, to be honest. Because as an Asian guy that actually sounds Asian, my identity feels like a joke now.
So, for the purposes of this video, we'll be focusing not on the Uncle Roger show, but the creator and actor behind the popular character, Nigel Ng. Because while Uncle Roger isn't a real person, Nigel definitely is. So to both humanize and speak directly to the man behind the caricature, I will be referring directly to Nigel for the rest of this video. Nigel Ng, a 33-year-old comedian and YouTuber, was born and raised in Malaysia, having grown and resided in his native home until he eventually relocated to the United States for college in 2010. As Nigel says himself,
I grew up, not without a lot of money, so my parents would just want their kids to go to a good school, graduate, get a nice white-collar job.
And for most of his early adulthood, he did just that, following the stereotypical Asian life journey of academic try-hard to high-paying career. Except during his time in college, Nigel would also develop a passion for comedy, which he's been pursuing since 2011. But his career as a successful comic wouldn't come to prosper until much later. After graduating from Northwestern in 2014, Nigel began working as a data scientist, and as he says himself,
I would go to work and then do my data science job, and at night I would go do an open mic, travel to a gig, come back, sleep, go to work again the next day.
However, right as he made the decision to quit his job for the opportunity of pursuing a career as a comedian, the COVID pandemic hit, and Asian Americans found themselves positioned from model minority to yellow peril. Wait, fuck. Basically, once lockdown was in full effect, his opportunity at in-person performances ended, so Nigel decided to chance it with social media instead. Adopting the Uncle Roger character he had been developing since his Rice to Meet You podcast with Evelyn Mook, Nigel transitioned to YouTube, dropping his viral hit review of a BBC egg fried rice recipe. Soon following his famed video with another banger criticizing Jamie Oliver's egg fried rice as the infamous Uncle Roger. And credit where credit's due, Nigel was low-key cooking. Jamie Oliver's egg fried rice was actually an abomination, and BBC really shouldn't have had the audacity to televise some cruddy egg fried rice recipe. And from that point on, Nigel's following exploded. And not gonna lie, I kinda understand why he popped off. While to many peeps of non-Asian descent, his videos may have just seemed like a funny character dissing chefs messing up Asian dishes, to many Asian, yellow, and brown people, the character of Uncle Roger probably resonated deeply because it granted us the much needed catharsis of an unhinged Asian uncle shitting on white people and televised networks who have long bastardized Asian cuisines for decades. We finally had a figure who would clap back at colonizers and stand up for our culture. Or so we thought. Because while the character of Uncle Roger was initially far from perfect, little did we know he would eventually side with the very forces he once defended us from. Because either consciously or not, as Nigel's channel grew, he probably started noticing a trend. That the content focused around the comedy of Nigel uplifting Asian culture did moderately well, while the videos playing up Asian stereotypes and making jokes at our expense began going viral. So, upon realizing roadblocks towards his goal of becoming a comedian for adults, he soon decided to try his hand at being a clown for kids, and thus, the Uncle Roger we know today was solidified with the specific use of a type of clownery that Nigel made himself professional in, the vintage tradition of minstrelsy. Beginning in the 1830s, minstrelsy was a form of theater originating from Northeast America. Compared to typical theatrical performances at the time, which typically displayed melodrama adapted from European playwrights, minstrelsy was a uniquely American creation centered on minstrels, or an actor who would display stereotypical caricatures of African Americans. Through the use of blackface and exaggerated routines meant to mock Black Americans for the leisure of their audience, characters like the Jezebel, Mammy, Sambo, and Uncle Tom were created to directly profit from dehumanizing Black people to validate the ignorant beliefs of their white audience's own supremacy. And in doing so, the tradition of minstrelsy met monumental demand, spreading not just through America, but also reaching past the seas to Europe and beyond. Of course, while minstrel shows were predominantly performed via white actors, there were a minority of Black Americans performing racist caricatures as well. After all, to some individuals, the profit to be gained through selling out their own communities seemed too tempting to resist. Unsurprisingly, once actors progressed from physical theater to cinema and film, so too did the tradition of minstrelsy. And with the explosion of immigration into America from all corners of the globe, minstrelsy ceased being a performance utilized solely against Black Americans, but began targeting other minorities as well. And from examples of yellowface being seen in Fu Manchu, The Hatchet Man, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Flower Drum Song, The Chappelle Show, and How I Met Your Mother, it's clear that Asian Americans were no exception to being dehumanized through the use of racial caricatures. Unfortunately, with minstrelsy being a hit with live audiences and a certified hood classic across television and film, it was unsurprising that it would eventually find its way onto social media. And with YouTube going from homemade cat videos to uncanny valley-ass smiling Mr. Shithead, it makes sense that minstrelsy would eventually wrap its hands around a YouTube that continually sought to commercialize and corporatize itself. And likewise, such with the Black minstrel performers who made the decision to spread racist imagery of their own race and ethnic groups for an opportunity at personal profit, there was no shortage of Asian individuals willing to do so as well. And thus, Asian minstrel after Asian minstrel burst onto the scene, while we yellow and brown peeps could do nothing more than cringe while being constantly dehumanized and laughed at. But of course, this proliferation of minstrelsy onto YouTube wasn't just accomplished through a singular performance or comedy skit. It started rather unassumingly via the slow bastardization of the community and brand fostered by beloved OG Asian American YouTubers. Before Nigel, we had OG Asian YouTubers making comedy sketches such as Ryan Higa, Kev Jumba, and the Fung Bros, to name a few. And unlike the YouTube we know today, videos back then were unable to be monetized, so videos weren't driven by profit. As such, many of the OG Asian YouTubers decided to make videos either as a way to share jokes with friends and family, or as a creative outlet. So unsurprisingly, while some of the jokes did play on stereotypes at times, their content was often culturally tied to the Asian American experience and never carried the vibe that purposely perpetuated harmful images. Low-key, there were a plethora of jokes that probably wouldn't be understood outside the context of the Asian American experience. But good things don't last forever. People grow up, and the landscape of YouTube is in constant flux, always seeking to replace the old with the new. Nowadays, Ryan Higa just streams, Kev Jumba disappeared off the face of the internet, and while the Fung Bros still make content by and for the culture, they've long shifted from sketches to social commentary. And while some may find these departures a bit sad, I'm kind of proud of their growth. Compared to other OG YouTubers like Onision, Colleen Bollinger, and Shane Dawson who got exposed for shouting slurs, doing blackface, and a whole litany of other problematic bullshit, it's kind of endearing to know that most of the OG Asian YouTubers opted to gracefully step back for the next generation. By the way, if you're watching this, Nigel, please slowly direct your audience to my channel over the next few years. I know your channel is still pretty young, but your content is problematic trash, so I'll take over as a responsible next-gen YouTuber of Asian descent. And by the time your channel dies and I take all your fans, they'll probably be old enough to where they can realize how harmful your videos were and finally start unlearning all that ignorance. Thanks in advance. Anyway, as YouTube became a larger financial juggernaut, the potential of making a comfortable living as a content creator soon reached praxis. And for as many responsible Asian American YouTubers willing to give way to the next generation, there was an equal amount of new wave Asian YouTubers like Rice Gum, Stephen He, and Nigel purely in it for money and clout. Having watched the content creators before them, compared to the OGs, the following group were keenly aware that YouTube wasn't just a platform for sharing humor and hobbies, but a legitimate space where a lot of money could be made. Thus, this next generation would begin optimizing videos for virality over authenticity. As an interesting tidbit, despite Ryan Higa starting YouTube 14 years earlier than Nigel, Nigel's only a year younger than Ryan, so there's really no reason the caricature and stereotypes in Nigel's videos should be like 3 times more problematic than what 16-year-old Ryan Higa was cooking. Of course, that's not to say there weren't issues with the jokes and stereotypes used by the OGs, just that the intent and context behind it was inherently different. You see, most Asian Americans, as with most marginalized people, got bullied for growing up differently in America. So, as a coping response, we could observe that many of these peeps resorted to playing into being ridiculed to feel less excluded. Because while getting picked on sucks, it's easier to get laughed at if you're the one inviting laughter, even if it does still hurt on the inside. And we can see this influence explain why many of the OGs included stereotypes into the jokes. As Ryan Higa admitted himself,
I noticed that the reason Dick was bullying me was to make people laugh, so I figured that if I could make them laugh and become the funny guy, they would stop treating me like I was less than them. Every time they made fun of me, I ran with it, and I made fun of myself even more than they could, and I actually found a way to end the bullying on my own terms.
But Nigel has never experienced any of that. As discussed in part 1, homie didn't leave Malaysia till he was already an adult.
How old were you when you left Asia?
20.
He never had an upbringing where any Asian stereotypes or racist jokes were used against him. So we know he's not making these jokes from experience or as a coping mechanism embedded into his humor. As homie says himself,
where you grew up, presumably, most people were Malaysian in Malaysia.
Yeah,
right?
I was born and raised in Malaysia, lived there for 20 years. Like you said, I'm from Asia, I'm from Malaysia.
If we really put our thinking caps on, knowing that Nigel was never exposed to Asian stereotypes or had racist jokes used against him, it makes sense that homeboy intentionally taught himself how to utilize racist and ignorant perceptions against yellow and brown people. So Nigel really was in it for the money and clout after all. And while I don't oppose yellow and brown people getting a bag for sharing their culture, I do feel it necessary to speak out against those who do so in a harmful way to others of their community. And akin to how black minstrel performers perpetuated stereotypes against their own race and ethnicities, Nigel's comedy is no different. We've already discussed how Nigel probably has a PhD in minstrelsy, but let's solidify that further with a few examples of how he performs it while highlighting the harm it contributes. In case you weren't aware, Nigel's character Uncle Roger is probably most famous for his Asian accent. Beyond the character being fake, his Asian accent is fake too. Of course, not in the way that he doesn't have an accent, but that the accent he uses while LARPing as Uncle Roger isn't his authentic one. And how do we know this? Well, it's cause Nigel isn't as professional as The Undertaker and actually breaks character. In fact, in most of his interviews, Nigel just defaults to his regular accent and communicates that his natural accent isn't as thick as his characters.
Now my English, you can still hear traces of Asianness in it, but it's a little bit more westernized now.
But if he already has an Asian accent, then why does he use another one for his videos? Well, it's probably because his YouTube comedy is lowbrow trash. After all, if the accent wasn't what homie was crutching on for laughs, then why would he need it? He already has an Asian accent, right? Why isn't that enough? Why must he rely on his overly exaggerated one for the Uncle Roger character to work? Well, it's probably because he was a fucking clown and generally unfunny. In my opinion, of course. I know comedy is subjective and stuff. But if we're being honest, if Nigel said the stuff he says in his videos with his regular Asian accent, his videos probably wouldn't be as entertaining anymore to a large chunk of his fan base. Cause for reasons I'll delve deeper into during part 5, His fans aren't laughing at his jokes because they relate to them and find them funny. They're laughing at his jokes because they're laughing at people of Asian descent. And Nigel likely knows this. In an interview, when receiving pushback for his character, he explains that,
like Uncle Roger without an accent, it just wouldn't be right.
And I absolutely agree. His normal Asian accent isn't enough. Just like how not painting your face black when portraying black stereotypes isn't racist enough to make racists laugh. Wouldn't want your audience humanizing those at the receiving end of harmful stereotypes after all. But the point is, if Nigel didn't put on a fake Asian accent while playing the Uncle Roger character, then his jokes wouldn't be funny. Because many of his fans aren't watching him for his cultural jokes or insight, but to see an Asian clown who invites them to feel comfortable enough to laugh at yellow and brown folks. Again, Nigel's most likely aware. He has openly stated that he couldn't do a full comedy show as Uncle Roger.
I did a 20-minute sets with Uncle Roger on my tour, and then I come out and do an hour. Can he sustain like an hour-long comedy show? Probably not, so Uncle Roger opens for me.
And now you know why. At the end of the day, the accent doesn't contribute positively to depicting Asian peeps. It simply acts as a way to alienate and foreignize people of Asian descent, painting them as incapable of being fully integrated as a part of Western society. But Nigel wouldn't admit that his character harms Asian Americans. That would hurt his profit margins. So instead, he makes bullshit excuses and continues to defend his actions. So let's break down his justifications and whether or not they resolve all the issues discussed earlier. Spoiler alert, they don't. If you happen to fall into the minority of his viewers who have watched as many of Nigel's interviews as me, i.e. pretty much all of them, you'll notice some trends in his arguments for Uncle Roger's accent. Most notably, he typically defaults to the reasoning that
I view Uncle Roger as a celebration of Asianness and Asian culture and Asian things in general. Asians have accents.
So his character has one too. But this is a crock of bullshit. Again, Nigel already has an Asian accent, so if we want to accurately represent Asian accents, why not just use his own? Minstrelsy, money, clout, virality, am I missing anything? Probably. However, if you get past his initial defense, then homie pretty much starts accusing you of being the problematic one instead, saying shit like,
I think the people who also think Uncle Roger shouldn't have an accent, they're essentially saying that Uncle Roger should sound white, which is very problematic in itself.
First off, no, you ignorant idiot. Speaking without an accent doesn't make you adjacent to being white, Nigel. If that was true, then my yellow ass wouldn't have gotten bullied growing up with the same ignorant nonsense your video promotes. And I'd be vicariously laughing at Asian people through your videos instead of calling you on your bullshit. You can't sound white, you idiot. How many Asian slurs do I have to drop on Nigel before homie's convinced I'm not white? By Nigel's own logic, I will never be able to escape being whitewashed because I was born in a Western country and speak with an American accent. And here I thought Nigel wanted to uplift Asian culture. Instead, homie's out here spinning some accent quantum type shit, telling me that I'm less Asian than others because of the way I was taught to speak. What the fuck? Also, if we're gonna take Nigel's word that speaking without an accent makes you sound white and rids you of your Asianness, then he himself links into that logic that he claims is problematic. Homie has literally been caught in 4K saying,
Now my English, it's a little bit more westernized now.
So basically, using his own logic, the fake Uncle Roger character he created is more Asian than him via a thicker accent, and every time he breaks character and speaks naturally, he's actively conforming to whiteness and erasing his Asianness. And here I thought Nigel was trying to uplift Asian culture once again, not him trying to become white. But on a serious note, you cannot sound white because race isn't dependent on how you were socialized or taught a language. And to directly address his statement, no one is saying Nigel should make his character sound white. He already has an Asian accent, so we're just asking him not to use a bastardized version of it. You see, unlike the lies Nigel is telling you about Uncle Roger's accent being intended to uplift Asians, it's really just a means to further foreignize and stereotype yellow and brown peeps while gatekeeping Asianness from those raised in Western nations. But let's not overcomplicate things. Homie is just dehumanizing people of Asian descent so that non-Asians can feel guilt-free laughing at us. And finally, if all else fails, Nigel will then try to tug at your heartstrings.
I'm curious who the people are that generally criticize you. Do you see a pattern there?
Usually Western Asians, Asian Americans. I think it's something people get sensitive because of their life experience. So I empathize with you guys, but I guess you also have to empathize with me, right? That is how I grew up.
So he's suggesting we both try to understand each other's perspectives. You know what? Let's give this little bilateral empathy experiment a shot. For Nigel, he empathizes with us Asian peeps in Western countries by recognizing how we might have been negatively harmed growing up and continue to be hurt by the accent and stereotypes he portrays. And in response to that, Nigel does what? Nothing? He just continues to perform minstrelsy at the expense of yellow and brown folks despite our complaints? And for us peeps of Asian descent in the West, Nigel wants us to empathize with him by recognizing that he grew up in Malaysia, where an Asian accent was the norm, and that the stereotypes he now portrays were never utilized against him, so he suggests that we should be more considerate of him by not criticizing him for continuing to actively harm us because he wasn't raised to know any better. Yeah, definitely not. No way this dude is trying to guilt trip us and tell us that we're the ones lacking consideration and should stop criticizing him for continuing to perpetuate ideas that harm us for the sake of his wallet. To set in stone how dumb this is, let's use a comparative example. Say I grew up in a KKK family, and like the generations of family members before me who were all part of the KKK, when I grow of age, I also joined the KKK and start lynching ethnic minorities. If you, as a minority, are directly harmed by my racist acts, should you suddenly be expected to empathize with me and not criticize or prevent me from lynching minorities because that's just how I grew up? Nah, fuck that shit, bro. As an additional note, I also found footage of Nigel claiming that
I have had people telling me to go back to China and stuff like racist stuff. It's not like they did that because we make our content, right? Because
the racist people are going to be racist anyway.
Exactly.
Whether or not you make the content.
Hateful people are hateful.
But that's just a lazy cop-out. Racists do not appear out of nowhere, Nigel. They don't just jump out of a portal, idiot. Racists are socialized and taught to be racists because babies aren't born racist. So stop making excuses that you can't control how racists perceive your content when you literally perpetuate stereotypes and foster ignorance. Of course, Nigel doesn't just defend himself. Some of his supporters claim that his content does a lot of good for Asian culture. Does that good outweigh the harm his videos promotes? In my opinion, definitely not. But let's take a more nuanced approach and investigate these claims anyway. Firstly, to those who claim his content does good for peeps of Asian descent, my question is how? Sure, he does promote Asian culture and cuisine, but is that a good thing? Tackling the cultural promotion? We've already established his character as a minstrel perpetuating harmful stereotypes, so we can cross him promoting positive images of Asian peeps off the list. And while I acknowledge that he promotes Asian cuisine, is that really a good thing? While he may introduce a new audience to Asian dishes, is someone discovering and eating a banh mi for the first time good for Asian culture? Or does Nigel just provide an excuse for his audience to indulge in the consumerism and consumption of Asian culture? I'm not going to argue that Nigel hasn't contributed anything of benefit to Asian culture, but if you aren't of Asian descent and directly affected by the stereotypes that Nigel actively promotes, then I don't want to hear you weighing the cost-benefit analysis of whether people like me should be sacrificed for whatever supposed good Nigel does for Asian culture. Also, since Nigel likes to claim that he's doing it all to uplift Asian culture and would never put it down, here's an extended compilation of him doing the exact opposite.
You don't want food from Laos, Cambodia. Laos food like shit version of Thai food. Uncle Roger, go traveling, go to Taj Mahal, go everywhere. Everybody go konnichiwa, konnichiwa. If you want to scam my money, get my race right.
5% of the roles in Hollywood are Asian.
And that's how it should be, okay?
If you want roles, go back to China.
I mean, that is a true statement though.
And he's a nephew from Taiwan. Not a real country.
Uncle Roger don't like Korean food anymore. Korean food like shit version of Japanese food.
Nephew, where you from? From Wuhan. Wuhan! You need to wear the face mask. You need to wear face mask. Wuhan! Thank you for the last 3 years. Why you eat that bat? Why you eat that bat? Why?
Yeah, because Asia's a shithole. We gotta leave.
And not gonna lie, despite everything I've shown till now, there will probably still be some people calling me a triggered snowflake and claiming that it's just a joke. Well, guess what? I am triggered. I am molding and tweaking the fuck out over YouTube commentary sketches. But being an emotionally volatile frog dude doesn't inherently refute all my points, does it? And I'm gonna get shit on for this, but y'all peeps out here claiming it's just a joke are the real snowflakes. Imagine being so emotionally inept that you rather turn a serious event with legitimate social and practical repercussions into a joke because you don't want to cope with tackling the issue head on.
Oh my god, like, can we talk about like the political and economic state of the world right now?
Instead of saying no Diddy or making baby oil jokes, why don't you actually internalize the fact that Sean Combs is a potential, alleged, supposed, possible, very well could be, thought of but not yet confirmed, agreed consensus that is yet to be validated, I'm not getting sued for this shit, sex trafficker. Oh, it's uncomfortable to think about the violence he enacted on many young boys and girls? You don't want to process that? Shut up, you little emotionally stunted, afraid to take things serious, turns everything into a joke because you can't cope with the horrors of reality, wussy-ass snowflake? You mad yet, snowflake? Did me calling you out for being a little snowflake upset your feelings? Well, good. Now you're just like me, triggered, except you're a coward. Y'all probably thought this video was just gonna be focused on trashing Nigel, but nah. I wouldn't waste my time exposing some minstrel douchebaggery if I wasn't able to extract a bigger message from it. You see, shitting on Nigel is simply the medium I chose with which to illustrate the effects of a white audience on marginalized performances, and how those performances can lead to internalized self-hatred within colored communities when crafted with the intentions of capturing the white gaze. And if this shift in tone surprises you, then y'all should have really watched my last video, cause if you did, you would have been knowing that I'm a gaslighting scumbag. Anyway, if it wasn't obvious, Nigel Ng's content targets a younger demographic.
Sorry, children.
And to any of y'all who are over the age of 25 that enjoys Uncle Roger videos, bruh, I'm not even gonna get into it, you're cooked. But the point is, Nigel's lowbrow comedy should only really be funny to peeps' prefrontal lobe development, which is uniquely problematic when you grasp how his audience of mainly children and teens are spoon-fed content structured to promote racist stereotypes at the expense of many yellow and brown peeps in the West. And most of those viewers are probably white, since white peeps greatly outnumber minorities in English-speaking countries, which doesn't seem too bad initially till you realize that they're the ones spreading Asian hate, and that the non-yellow and brown people raised in the West like Nigel can't relate to our issues, which inherently puts them in a position of laughing at us rather than with us. To delve into this further, we should realize that in Western countries, white people are perpetually validated that they are better than minorities, while people of marginalized backgrounds are conditioned to view themselves as lesser than. Don't believe me? Just watch the latter half of my first video. But to save y'all some time, just ask yourself why non-white peeps are referred to as minorities while white people aren't called majorities. It's because white people are seen as people first, while everyone else is a colored person, a marginalized person, a minority, or any other individual with a descriptive other that always comes before their personhood. And this matters because white people don't need to think about being white. They're just conditioned to view themselves as people and not to see color. So without needing to think about their culture, they never had to think about authentic and bastardized versions of other cultures, and thus likely can't differentiate Asian caricatures and stereotypes from authentic depictions of Asianness. So when Nigel tells them jokes belittling Asian people and their culture, it just affirms their otherizations of yellow and brown peeps. This is important, because you need to be aware that Asian Americans are only around 7% of the population. And they're concentrated on either coast of America too. So most non-Asian Americans will have had few, if not zero, substantial interactions with Asian Americans that could provide any insight into our lives or struggles with marginalization. As such, Nigel is probably most of his non-Asian audience's avenue into getting a glimpse of the Asian experience, which is deeply problematic when you acknowledge that his character is a fake minstrel stereotype who presents itself as the ultimate authority on Asian culture and cuisine. And Nigel continues to do all the stuff I've criticized for a reason. He's already spoken about being aware of the gripes Asian Americans have with him. He just doesn't care. But maybe Nigel does care. Maybe he actively invites this controversy. I mean, he has admitted that it's good for attention.
I'm about to release my special, so because it's a pay-per-view, you want to drum up some sales, right? When you put out a clip that works well for marketing is a clip that will go viral. So because I've been through the cancellation, my instinct tells me this bit will ruffle some feathers.
You see, while it's debatable whether Nigel cares that his content may harm yellow and brown peeps, he probably does care that his content can be used to harm folks of Asian descent. By the way, y'all should know that his content skyrocketed during peak Asian hate, and his primary audience is probably white. So if Nigel wanted to maximize profit and attention, he could easily make jokes at the expense of yellow and brown peeps to please an ignorant white audience seeking out content that affirms their beliefs in their racial supremacy. Cause people want to feel good about themselves, especially growing children and teens who need plenty of affirmation and validation. And that's perfectly fine. Issues only arise in regards to how that self-love is obtained. And unfortunately, we live in a hyper-competitive society where it's much easier to tear down others to feel better about ourselves. Think about it this way. If you're on a Minecraft server and you want to have the best house out of all the players, sure, you could spend days on end building up your own base, or you could just spend an hour griefing the fuck out of everyone else's base until you have the only home left, giving you by default the best house on the server. Except in our example, you're tearing down another person's race to feel a sense of superiority in your own race instead. And this logic intrinsically links the effect of white audiences on marginalized performances and thus Nigel's content. If Nigel knows his fanbase is predominantly made of white kids and teens who go on YouTube to be entertained and to feel good about themselves, then he just has to shit on Asian people and their culture. Nigel releases a video performing Minstrelsy, his majority white audience likes it and gives him more attention and ad revenue, which makes Nigel more prone to playing into stereotypes, which makes those white people watch more of his videos to validate their supremacy, and now we have a positive feedback loop of perpetuating literal racism. So, despite Nigel lacking a professional background in Asian cuisine or history, he pretends such because his audience wouldn't know any better, and it allows him to easily access putting down Asian culture via the guise of criticism and cultural commentary. So when he puts down certain Asian foods or calls Asia a shithole, his impressionable non-Asian viewers probably just accept whatever he's saying as true, even if he himself doesn't believe it. Simply put, once Nigel realized the majority of his English-speaking audience weren't of Asian descent, and that he could make way more money by expanding his audience, homie was like, fuck these chinks, I'ma sell them out for the bag. Especially after he got banned on all Chinese social media platforms by the CCP. Also, Nigel doesn't just indirectly perpetuate harm through validating white supremacy and othering yellow and brown peeps. He directly contributes to violence against brown and yellow peeps by fueling their internalized self-hatred and insecurities. The Uncle Roger character is pretty much an accumulation of all the worst qualities of Asian tiger parents, being overly critical, nitpicky, and equipped with an overwhelming sense of superiority and pride. So when Nigel says,
Laos food like shit version of Thai food,
or implies that people of Asian descent without accents are lesser than in terms of being culturally Asian, he contributes to a substantial amount of internalized self-hatred and cultural insecurity from his Asian audience who were raised in the West. Keep in mind, the majority of his fan base are literally developing kids, and children of Asian descent in America have constantly gotten ridiculed for being racially Asian even before discovering YouTube. I mean, I got bullied for being yellow way before I discovered getting jump scared by Michael Jackson back in 2010. So it doesn't help that when young Asian Americans finally get online, rather than receiving validation in their identity, they get a minstrel clown putting down their culture and telling them that they'll never be Asian enough due to a Western accent they have no control over. I need to make this clear, Nigel grew up in Malaysia till he was 20. Unlike yellow and brown peeps raised in the West, he never internalized insecurity towards being Asian or getting bullied for his race. So when he actively perpetuates racist stereotypes of Asians and deems certain Asian cultures inferior to others as a joke, he probably can't imagine it causing Asian Americans to feel insecure and hating themselves for their race and cultural heritage. Honestly, I'm trying to give Nigel the benefit of the doubt and concluding that he's just ignorant of racism and violence used against peeps of Asian descent in Western countries. Because if I don't, considering all the other stuff of him earlier admitting to understanding why Asian Americans would be upset with his actions and how he capitalizes off of controversy, the alternative would mean that Nigel intentionally perpetuates racism for profit. So when Nigel puts on the orange shirt and accent, please understand why it's easy for him to perform minstrelsy. Cause it doesn't affect him while Asians growing up in the West are belittled and reduced by it. Just think about it. A Malaysian kid isn't gonna get bullied for bringing Malaysian food to lunch in the same way that American kids are expected to eat and serve the American food in our cafeterias. But Asian American kids are definitely gonna get comments about their lunch being smelly or looking weird if they brought ethnic food to school. Honestly, there's no clearer way that I can communicate the pain that I and likely many others experience from watching Nigel's videos to you than to truthfully convey that Nigel literally uses Asian accents and stereotypes in the same way that our childhood bullies did. Despite having a lot of fun making this video, it kinda sucks I have to shit on Nigel. I'm sure a lot of the ignorance towards the harm he's causing yellow and brown peeps is likely to resolve his upbringing in Asia more so than an intentional act of malice. That said, impact can still outweigh intent, and Nigel isn't just an innocent little creator. He's a grown man in his 30s with millions of subscribers. He should really know better. For example, if Nigel and I were friends and I ran into him on the streets while he was surrounded by his younger fans, I'm not gonna be like, "Sup, my chink," and dap him up. Cause I know that whether or not I intended it, his audience is gonna observe my behavior and usage of a slur, and then start associating it with a positive greeting, or even worse, begin calling Asian people it. Unfortunately, the difference between the example and real life is that Nigel either is unaware of his negative influence or just doesn't care about spreading racism and ignorance. But Nigel, you're a celebrity now. You got the attention you always wanted, so please act like it and take some responsibility for how your actions may influence your audience. Try to actually empathize with us, Nigel. You can make jokes about Asian stereotypes and choose when or when not to use your accent, but many Asian Americans cannot. The crux is that you always had a choice when to expose yourself to Asian hate. We of Asian descent in the West do not. I mean, you literally popped off during peak COVID-induced Asian hate. What does that really say about your content? So, at the end of the day, you had a choice, Nigel. You chose to do us dirty. You chose to kick us while we were down, while we were getting beaten in the streets and hate crimed across America. when we have already been done dirty for decades. Every decision you made to harm us was a choice, which is why I chose to make this video. Whatever response it may elicit, whether I get 0 views, face backlash from his fans, or this video pops off and directly affects Nigel's profit and produces a noticeable change in his behavior, which it probably won't because his audience includes a bunch of ignorant bigots who don't give a fuck about harming yellow and brown peeps, or even if it enters a perception of Nigel himself and potentially hurts him to watch this, the making of this video was fully my choice. So if you're watching this, Nigel, I'm sorry if anything I've said in this video hurt you or will lead to any impacts that negatively affect you. I really mean that. It brings me no pleasure to see people of Asian descent in pain, but I'm sick and tired of the harm that you've caused. So I've decided that if you refuse to stop and it's either me or you, then it can't be me anymore. It has to be you who will have to suffer. Cause this pain that you feel from my singular video is the very same pain that me and countless other yellow and brown people have experienced with each and every one of your posts. The bottom line is that this has to stop, and I'm no god. I can't force you to stop. I'm just a small channel trying to amass enough of a following that I can eventually create the world I want to exist in. So in summary, I ain't dying for your sins, Nigel. As a final note, to those of y'all who are fans of Nigel Ng or Uncle Roger and are mad I'm criticizing your gateway to feeling comfortable participating in violence against yellow and brown people, shut the fuck up, I don't care. I'm not real, so your criticism doesn't affect me. Joke's on you, sucker. I'm just the same thing Uncle Roger is, except I'm not painting my face yellow and putting on an Asian accent. I'm just an angry frog character on the internet, which means if you disagree with my criticisms of Uncle Roger, then you can't even be mad. Cause I'm just a caricature, one who throws shade at Asian people, nitpicks, and believes their own opinion constantly in the right that makes jokes at the expense of others. Don't you get comedy? It's supposed to be funny, you triggered little snowflake. Maybe just learn how to take a joke instead of getting angry if you can't handle a bit of humor. And what's that? You might have actual criticism you want to take up with the person behind the angry frog persona? Well, too bad, I didn't put my face out on the internet for a reason. Mwah! Feel free to leave a comment or send an email if you have legit criticisms or things in my video you take issue with, by the way. But honestly, despite my multitude of gripes against Nigel, I do not think Nigel is a racist, and I do not think he is purposely trying to harm Asian people. Maybe. I don't know. I listened to a lot of his videos and interviews and podcasts, and I'm pretty sure he's aware that his actions directly harm yellow and brown folks in the West and just doesn't care, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Because like me, I think we both strive to uplift those of Asian descent. But I also believe that while Nigel as a person may not be racist, his actions definitely are. So regardless if he intends such, his actions buttress the structural racist tropes ingrained in racialized performances marketed towards entertaining a white audience at the expense of marginalized bodies. And that might not be too bad in a microcosm, such as making a race joke in the presence of close friends, but that's not what Nigel is doing. Uncle Roger isn't a person, he is a character on display for literally hundreds of millions to see. And again, you cannot blame these things on the character because they're not real, but you can take issue with the creator. After all, Nigel is the one puppeting Uncle Roger and he's definitely aware of his wide fan base. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thought it profitable to go mainstream and to open a restaurant. And Nigel, if you weren't aware of the damages you were doing, then you are now. I've tried to give you all the benefits of doubt that I could, so if you see this video, then it's probably time to do some self-reflection. I understand that change doesn't happen instantly, and it would be too high of an expectation for me to ask you to completely refrain from what you made intrinsic to your brand, but now that you've been explicitly educated on the harms I believe you have done to our community, I hope you take these concerns of mine to heart. And if you happen to actually concern yourself with uplifting peeps of Asian descent, and can begin understanding how your actions may have reproduced structures of racism and stereotypes used against yellow and brown people who had grown up bullied by the same jokes that you now spout, then I just ask that you slowly wean away from these harmful behaviors, such as putting down other Asian cultures and cuisines, and playing up racist stereotypes to appeal to your audience. I mean, surely having nearly 10 million subscribers, international fame, and your own restaurant is more than enough for you to stop punching down and harming our community for profit, right? Like, can't you just fucking cruise off your earnings now and start lowering the amount of ignorance your content promotes as your young audience probably grows in maturity? That's really all I'm asking of you. And if you can't do that, well, fuck you, asshole! Suck my dick, you racist piece of shit! By the way, does Stephen O'Brien or any other Asian person making similar content to Nigel you better start fixing your act. Steven, you were one fucking interview away explaining your upbringing from me putting your ass on blast. You better hope I don't discover the context behind how you were raised, because if I find out that you grew up with only a white dad and never had a single Asian father figure while simultaneously getting famous off of playing a stereotypical Asian dad, I'm about to do you even dirtier than I did Nigel. Anyway, that's it for the video. No one joined my Patreon for the last video because that shit got no views, so I don't have any names added to the credits. So if you want your name added to the credit or found value in this video and would like to contribute, please give me all your money via the Patreon linked in the description below. But even if you can't pay, you can always join for free. Otherwise, to everyone else watching, I would appreciate it if you did all the other stuff I'm supposed to e-beg for, like subscribing, commenting, leaving a like, and sharing my video. And that's about it. I'll catch you on the next one. Okay, thanks, bye.